Hello, and thank you for joining us once again. We are broadcasting from Tongco with Primaris Market Development back with us. Thank you for joining us, Chad. How are you doing?
Doing well, John. How are you? Thanks for
Doing-
having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. I know you're on the road right now and you got a lot going on, but truly, thanks for fitting us in.
No, absolutely. I wouldn't miss this for the world. So I apologize ahead of time for the background noise.
Hey, no worries, but no worries at all. Let me quick share this to my Facebook page because we were talking a little bit beforehand when we got this going, and I am super excited because you shared just a little tidbit with me, and I'm just like, okay, this is stuff that people need to know about. So please, as I'm putting this on my Facebook page, start it off. What have you got for us?
Well, John, I wanted to talk about our consumer behavior today and highlighting what's going on globally, but how it's impacting our small to medium-sized businesses across the United States.
So dive into that in a little more detail. Consumer, because we've been talking consumer behavior for a long time, especially along that digital/virtual world. But please elaborate.
Yeah, so we had an interesting study that came out back in July regarding consumer loyalty behavior. Consumer loyalty behavior. And it came back that 25% of consumers at that time were leaving their current brand or the brands that they were loyal to prior to COVID-19. And then a month later, August came around and McKinsey came out with a study on a global level that 75% of consumers are leaving their loyal brands for basically other brands to meet their necessities at this given point in time.
That's a huge 75% is no small number.
It's not. It's a significant shift, but that also tells us one thing. People are looking to fill their needs wherever they can and whenever they can. So the furthermore in the study, they proceed in talking about how consumers are moving towards more of private label brands rather than the mainstream brands, if you will.
That was the next question. Okay.
Yeah, and so that that tells us one thing as consumers, or more than anything, business owners. There's an opportunity. The Great Reset is not only for the Fortune 100 companies, but it's also for us. It's basically it's free for all right now. We have a huge opportunity to increase our market share as long as we do it the right way.
So this is one of those things. When you first hear something like this, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around everything that it encompasses because like you said, we're talking massive opportunity here. 75% of consumers are basically willing to switch brands right now. I mean, so in terms of brand loyalty, this is the lowest we've seen it in, I have no idea how long. I'd be totally bluffing. But like you're saying, this is an opportunity to take that small business and get it into the equation. This is the chance to take your shot, so to speak.
Yeah. And we'd want to consider right now, in the news, they're talking about Europe closing back down again because of the rise of coronavirus cases. Mm-hmm. So going back to the drawing board, if you will, you got to look at your supply chain logistics. You got to look at your manufacturing. I mean, you got to look at the entire picture here and where can you kind of move forward with the current institutional gap that is present due to coronavirus.
So this is kind of a funny, and this might be addressed in the study specifically. It might not. You mentioned that in that statistic, in that study, as people moved away from brand loyalty, they're looking more towards that smaller business, that window of opportunity, so to speak. Is this something known as an elastic market? Is it price sensitive, or is it really more of a, you know what? I don't give a rip about the price. I want to know the quality. I want to know the service, so on and so forth.
Great question. So it really goes back down to a shift to value and essentials. It's no longer, what's the shiniest out there? What's the coolest thing? It's really meeting your essentials. Because people, I'm sorry, John, but people saw that we had a massive shortage in toilet paper out of all things, right?
Truth.
And it gave people perspective. You know what? It doesn't matter what kind of brand it is. I just need to have one.
Okay, so it's in a funny way, we're shifting in the typical sales approach, which in my experience, and I've had a couple of friends tell me this too, it's like very, very emotional. When people make a purchase decision, it's very emotional. Am I interpreting this correctly? We're shifting away from that to where it's, if you can meet my needs right here on the spot, I'm not looking twice. You've got my business.
Correct. Correct.
Holy cow. I mean, you're talking massive shifts here, whether you're talking anything from marketing to supply chains, manufacturing, so on and so forth. You're really going down a long list here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a total economic shift, and we call this now a homebody economy, right? Where you're literally catering to people at home because people don't want to leave their home. Hence why you see, the rise of Amazon. You see the rise of delivery entities.
For sure. I think that's also, again, talking about like you're like the customer journey guru. Everything's virtual, everything's digital. But when you throw in this new consumer trend where there's very limited and massively decreasing brand loyalty to those traditional big names, this is kind of the funny opportunity here. It's interesting you bring that up because it brings to mind what we've seen in the processing world. Boutique retail has done phenomenally, and at least for our book of business, which take worth a grain of salt because we're a small company, I get it. But I've read enough studies and reports that they're seeing the same thing, and ironically, there are, granted, a lot of them have gone under, so it's a little bit of the extreme. You have some restaurants, some cafes doing the best they've ever done. We're having a podcast guest on in a couple of weeks. Best year they've ever had. And again, on the opposite end of the spectrum is they're totally going under. So when you're talking this shift in brand loyalty, now's the window of opportunity. And then it becomes the $1 million question. How do you get the foot in the door? How do you capture that market share?
Correct. And how you stay within it, right? And at the end of the day, it goes back down again to our accessibility to our services and products. And mobile centrism is at the forefront of that. Consumers, since they've come home more so than any other time before, it really is about being able to get in front of them through, the mobile use of technology. So the likes of creating apps or just creating a way to get in front of them through mobile is going to be a huge key to keeping your customers, your loyal base, I should say.
So, question there, not to go off on too much of a different tangent, but it's related. It is kind of specific. Are mobile apps still where everything is going? Because when we went through the course at Yale, mobile, there's a certain, I don't want to say size, but for lack of a better analogy, it's a little bit of, once you're at this level, you got to get an app. Are we going to be seeing more of that, or is it going to depend more upon the situation?
I think it truly depends for the company, per company. Okay. But at the end of the day, where are we going as a global consumer? I mean, it really is going towards digital, right? And mobility. No doubt. Mobility is the number one, really is the foremost leading technological device out there right now. So
for sure.
So that being said, it wouldn't hurt, looking into finding a way to develop an app to help you get in front of your customers 24/7 while you're asleep and while they're scrolling through their phones at 2:00 in the morning.
Yep.
Going through your products and services without having to open a browser. They simply go and directly connect with your product and services.
Exactly. And I think that brings to mind like a really personal example, even for what we're seeing at the McGraw Council. There's a difference between getting someone or something on board, making the purchase, but then continually engaging with them. And that's part of where I want to take the discussion next, that loyalty loop. With that decrease in brand loyalty, what do we as small businesses need to be doing to retain that customer, to retain that loyalty? Because if the big companies can lose it, that small business sure as heck can lose it. Yeah. What are some things that we can do to be proactive to ensure that we don't lose that market share that we just picked up and that we gave everything we had for?
Yeah. Well, we got to look at what our strengths are as small businesses, right? And the number one thing that pops up top of mind right now would be our ability to be agile and nimble, and our ability to be able to create a real personal relationship with our customers. So that being said, we got to look into creating and investing into our very own community, our brand community. Talking about what we like, what we don't like, ways of optimizing a brand and services and products, things of that nature, and then finding ways to engage with these customers digitally. That's the number one thing right now, because again, it's free for all, John. You could be in Texas, I'm in California, And
Yep.
at the end of the day, if I get on an app and I see you're talking, I mean, we did this at Yale.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
You
We
know,
saw the exact same thing. I think you bring up a good point there. Well, on community, when we think of community, we always think of our local community. Yes, that will always be there. And I personally love local community. Not that I'm biased. I mean, I admit I'm very biased. With that being said, though, there is something to be said for creating this digital slash virtual community. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's one of those things I feel like you can't say often enough. That's where consumer behavior is and is continually moving toward. We need to figure out how to not only create that virtual digital community, but then the continual engagement, and because keeping people in that loyalty loop, that final step in the customer journey. I mean, if you find a way to do that in this economy with that study that just came out, you're doing something massively right. Or I would argue borderline proprietary,
yeah,
because you're in the minority of businesses at that point. And that's, if you can get to that point, you're doing very well.
absolutely. And it only has real positive effects on the financial aspect of your business. I
For
mean,
sure.
it takes, like you and I talked about this in the past, it takes 7 times more amount of money to acquire a new customer. And so, my take on this, John, is start with your current consumer base, invest in them, love on them, care on them,
Yeah.
and then grow it from there. Use leverage the word of mouth, what we call earned media.
And I think you touch on a good point there. Retaining customers, having that high loyalty is always important. It's always been a focal point. With that being said, I can't help but make the conclusion it's even more important now. Apart from this study, just looking at the way COVID has impacted the economy, retaining your current customer base is huge. It is incredibly essential. But then you throw something like this in, where 25% of businesses, or rather, 25% of consumers are sticking with their traditional brand loyalty. If you're in that 25%, you're doing well. But how do you get there? It's that engagement. It's built, like you said, loving on the customer. Take care of what you've got. The goal right now is to survive this crazy chaos. If you can survive it, make it to the other side, then you can go for that fun growth mode. Unless you're in the rare position, few people are in, where it's like, yeah, I've got cash to spend and I'm going to go buy up equity. You know what? Go for it. That's a golden opportunity. Most of us don't have that at our fingertips like that.
Yeah.
So if you can find a way to survive, get through this wacky year, get out on the other side, there'll be massive opportunity. And to your point, there's opportunity right now. There's massive opportunity to take market share.
Yeah. You can treat it as if it were an emerging economy all over again. As people are looking to find their essentials and attain and retain their essentials, you have an opportunity as a business owner or as a business entity to fill that gap with whatever service you may find or you may see valuable to your consumer base.
So you made an interesting statement there. You would compare this to an emerging economy that early on in the economic life cycle. You would compare this to.
I wouldn't say to a grand scale of things,
Right.
but if we're looking at 75% of consumers leaving their loyalty, towards brands, that means that there's a gap there that needs to be filled, right? Where are these consumers going?
Fascinating.
Yeah, market shares are up for grab right now.
Man alive. Okay. So, well, let's run through an example here, because I always like to make it applicable for the small business. You're on our board of advisors. You're familiar with the McGraw Council. From a 40,000-foot view, again, just using this as an example so people can look internally at their business and say, what can I do? What would we do to increase our market share?
I think we go back to asking our current members, what would they like to hear more from us? And then determine how we can deliver those things. And then more than anything, what kind of deliverables will provide the optimal value to our people here. So, and the good news for McGraw Council is we are all over the United States. And at the end of the day, we may see some regional issues that may come up, or we may simply be able to talk about or address the nationwide issues that we're currently facing.
So that first step, again, in practical application, get to know the customer base, really love on them, talk to them, build that relationship, say, hey, what are we doing well? What can we improve on? What can we do to be even better?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So then following that train of thought, it's reach out to the customers, the membership in our situation, get to know them, get to know what they like, what we can improve on internally, and then you go to outreach and try to solve that problem for other people.
Yeah, coming from here's the best way to kind of put it together, John. Coming from a healthcare background like myself, I use the acronym called ADPIE. That's ADPIE, and that stands for assessment, diagnosis, planning, implementation, and evaluation. Now, these are 5 steps that we can implement in our business today. Assess our current market uh, by asking our consumers what's going on, what they like to see. Diagnose, basically determine out of that assessment, determine what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Plan, implement, and then evaluate.
There you go. Okay, so walk me through that one because I was taking notes. I confess, I'm writing this stuff down because I got to apply it, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
this customer interaction, this is kind of the first assessment.
Assessment,
Okay,
and
and then we're going to progress to diagnostics,
yes,
and
and
P was
then P is planning.
planning. Okay,
I is implementation, and then E is evaluation.
so then again, I know it's going to vary by business, by industries, a lot of different variables. What kind of time frame? 'Cause I always like to put time frames on things, otherwise they never get done. What kind of time frame should a small business be putting on this process? Because again, that market share, everyone, everyone that read that study, big, small, medium, they know it, and they're hearing and seeing the exact same thing that we are. What kind of time do we have to really take advantage of all this?
So well, let's see. We're at the tail end of Q4, and if we wanted to go in 2021 with a more firm understanding of what's going on in our market, we ought to start now. We ought to start asking our consumers what's happening. We got to start our diagnosis and then plan to implement by no later than January of 2021.
Okay, so we 7, 8 weeks or so to really assess, run our diagnostics, get our plan down, and then we want to be implementing come January.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me quick note on that. This is live accountability, y'all. We got to have our stuff rocking and rolling by January 2021. Okay, well, I think that's a really good starting point then. Get to know the customer base, go through your whole diagnostic process, and kind of get on that quickly. Do you find that it's typically pretty easy to get customers? Again, I get it depending upon what kind of industry you're in. Do you find it pretty easy, pretty quick, relatively speaking, to get that customer feedback in a usable format?
As long as you have kept in touch with your customer throughout the pandemic shutdown,
There's the caveat.
you should be able to reach them at this point in time. And really, the whole spin behind it is, hey, look, 2021 is coming. 2020 has been one heck of a year. We're looking to better our services, optimize our operations, so on as whatever it may be, right? Our
Mhm.
offerings. Can you help us? Give us insight what you'd like to see from us more.
So then that brings up another question. Thankfully, we're not in this position, but I'm sure there are small business owners out there. The mistake's been made. There hasn't been great connection, great communication. How does that impact this whole process? Because if we're talking about having good pre-existing relationships with our customer base, ready to rock and roll, basically stuff out January 2021. What does that look like if you don't have that pre-existing relationship where it's really more of just an email and a CRM, and that's about it?
It's not going to be as easy, if you will, to be able to just send out an email. You may have to do a little bit of kind of a brick and mortar approach, uh, using phone calls or knock on doors, and kind of get that face to face or a more personal interaction
Mm-hmm.
rather than just an email blast.
Okay.
Obviously, preferably for the sake of efficiency and time, as well as analytics, you want to be able to do an email blast, at this point in time. But if you had an unfortunate, circumstance that for some reason you weren't able to stay in touch with your consumers throughout the lockdown stages, it's not too late. I mean, I would knock on doors and make phone calls.
Agreed. And I would also say it's never too late to get to know your customer base better. It might put you behind schedule. It might put you behind the eight ball here and there. But again, to your point, it's 7 times more cost effective to retain a current customer. So number one, you got to focus on retention. But then number two, if you truly want to take that next step in your business life cycle, take your business to that next level, the best data you're going to find for feedback is going to be it's going to be that customer base, because they know you, they've purchased from you, they've completed that customer journey, they've been there with awareness, trigger, consideration, purchase decision, hopefully loyalty loop. That's going to be the best, cleanest slash purest, almost perhaps I might even say rawest data available.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And John, I must add that through this whole entire thing, it is imperative to have the right team members in play,
Oh, for sure.
the right people. So, you're going to want to consider reskilling or upskilling. You're going to want to maybe do your labor market research again, to see what kind of skills are out there for you to be able to attain the right talents to keep this ball rolling.
It's so true, because not only do you get into the whole talent and skills, because my assumption, I've talked to, we're blessed, we have a member up in Illinois, his name's Jim Owens, and he basically owns a talent acquisition and retention firm. There is a large pool of talent out there. In terms of like growing the business, now is the time. If you by some miracle have the cash and the capacity to take that step, you're going to get key talent and resources for pennies on the dollar. If you can take advantage of that, heck yeah, go get it. I mean, because it's there for the taking. Then you throw in something like this, the McKinsey study, 75% less basically brand loyalty. It's shocking. The opportunity is there. You just have to be able to go get it. And then also where I was going with that, get the right character, get the right personality. I mean, I'm going to butcher the quote from Jim Owens. He says something to the equivalent of talents and skills will get you hired, but culture will get you fired. I hope I got that right, Jim. Forgive me if I didn't. But it's so true. You have to bring on the right character, the right mentality, the right heart attitude, so to speak. Because you get people with the same vision, the same values, the same mindset. You get them working towards the same goal in the same room.
Yeah,
good things happen. Only good things happen from there.
Yeah, and reverting back to the digital commerce, it wouldn't hurt if you considered hiring a analytics person that simply oversaw your digital activities day in and day out, week after week, month after month.
Okay, so again, we're getting real applicable to small business. What does that look like? I mean, because small business budgets, we're trying to keep things run a tight ship and all that, but you also have to run the analytics to have a deeper understanding of that. What does that look like for a small business?
Yeah, not to add additional burden to our already really tight budgets, right? Expenditures. It really is more than anything your ability to be able to understand and maybe even see at the forefront before things really come to play the trends that are forthcoming, and how it's going to be affecting your industry, your segment. Both on a regional and a local level. You don't want to get too big in terms of, analytical issues unless otherwise it affects supply chain and it affects manufacturing, which could, if it affects your business at the same time. So, but for a small business, you're just going to want to maybe outsource. There are a lot of resources out there right now where you could hire someone to oversee your social media and your digital activities period for your website, your Google Analytics there, your social media analytics. I mean, you can outsource that for, I don't know, pennies to the dollar, man. And you don't necessarily have to hire someone full time at, 25, 35, 4,500 bucks a month.
Right. You can find it to scale it to your needs, so to speak. I mean, because that small business, that's a startup, maybe 1 or 2 employees. It's obviously going to have a different set of needs than a company that's got 30 employees and been around for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I got you. Well, we're kind of getting close to that 25-minute mark. Any closing words of wisdom?
You know what? I'm going to share a quote by Elon Musk, because you could see his business model really, really just, proven to be true and consistent against all odds, and against all the analysts in Wall Street, against, all the politicians going against him, whatnot. But his quote is this: focus on the signal and not on the noise. You want to focus on the signal and not on the noise.
I love it. Let's talk about a great closure. Thank you so much. Chad, thank you so much for making time today for Fitness. And I know you're on the road. I cannot thank you enough. Y'all, thanks for tuning in. I hope you found it useful and applicable. Make sure to like our Facebook page, like the video, and please drop in the comments if this surprised you or if you see an opportunity here. Please drop it in the comments. Let's help small businesses across the country understand how we can grow our market share here. It's opportunities now, y'all. Let's take advantage of it. Y'all stay safe, stay blessed, and remember, we're bullish on the American dream. We're bullish on your future. Take care.